Final Fantasy VIII is my second favourite Final Fantasy? Or third? I'm not really sure. The 8th entry is often looked at as the black sheep of the series, and this is partly due to the fact that it has one of the most unconventional and divisive systems I've ever seen in an RPG, the Junction system. Everything stems from junctioning, summons, magic, even something as simple as using items in battle. If you don't learn the junction system, you're not going to get very far. Or are you? Do you ever actually need to use the pesky, unintuitive junction system to get through this game? Can you beat Final Fantasy VIII without junctioning? Let's find out. Let's look at some rules, but first, if you enjoyed challenge runs on classic games like this, then you're in the right place. Please subscribe. After all, over 84% of people who watch this channel are not actually subscribed. I promise you won't regret it. Back to the rules. Rule number 1, we cannot use the junction system for anything. This means no summons, no abilities, no magic, no items in battle, or any other optional commands in battle. Rule number 2, no battle boosts. These are basically built-in cheats that come with the remastered version of the game. The only boosts we're allowed to use is speed up. And rule number 3, once we defeat Sorcerer's Ultimacia, the final boss of the game, we win. Just to give a quick rundown of the junction system, you start off by assigning a summon or summons to each character. Once you do that, that character can then use summons in battle, as well as magic in and out of battle, items in battle, and the draw command, as well as any other commands that can be learned throughout the game. You would have to manually assign a subset of up to 3 of these commands per character so that they can use them in battle. By default, each character only has access to the normal attack command, and if we never use the junction system to assign a summon to our characters, the attack command is the only command we will ever have access to. We are given 2 summons right away, but all summons will be useless in this run. We can't even assign abilities to our summons for them to learn, because if we don't equip a summon to a character, that summon will never gain any ability points in battle, and thus will never learn any abilities anyway. Before we leave Balam Garden, we enter the library and grab the Occult Fan magazine from the shelf. The first boss of the game, Ifrit, is very early on. We run away from all random encounters and head straight to the fire cavern. We must select a time limit, but this has very little bearing on the run. As a side note, in the interest of fairness, we will be avoiding the speed up boost during in-game timed sections, since the boost only speeds up gameplay and not the timer. We also run away from all encounters in the fire cavern as well. Defeating Ifrit without summons or magic takes a bit longer than normal, which means we will inevitably take more damage too. We're going to be very limited on healing in battle throughout the entire run, due to not having access to healing magic or items. We can still use items outside of battle though. Our biggest lifeline in this run will be limit breaks. If certain conditions are met in battle, then a character has a chance to use their unique limit break when their turn comes around. These conditions are mostly all based around how much danger we are in during battle. The danger level is officially called the crisis level. There's a whole formula that the game uses every time a party member's turn comes around, and that formula works out the current crisis level for that character. The crisis level may be boosted the more danger we're in, but it's also very RNG heavy. A few of the conditions that boost the crisis level are low HP, having status ailments, or having dead party members. So for now, the lower our HP is, the more likely we will get access to our limit breaks. We can even attack our own party members in battle to reduce their HP quicker. We know the limit break is available if we see an arrow next to the attack command. Squall's limit break, Renzoku-ken, is a series of gunblade attacks, whereas Quistis' limit break is a laser attack. Quistis can use certain items later to learn more limit break attacks, but for now the laser is all she has. Ifrit ends up wiping out Quistis and he whittles Squall's HP down. We use Renzoku-ken from there to win the fight. Ifrit will now join us as our 3rd summon, and this will be the last summon we gain in the whole run up until the final boss. Bosses don't give any experience points upon defeat, which is actually a good thing for this run. The reason for that is that the vast majority of the run, we actually want to keep almost all of our characters as low level as possible. This is the reason we've been running away from all random encounters so far, and here's why. Almost all enemy levels increase depending on our party's average level. If our party's average level is 19 or under, then that ensures that the random encounters and even bosses stay on the lowest stats possible. Normally, in low-level runs of Final Fantasy VIII, you can use summon abilities and junctioning to boost the character's stats with magic spells. This ends up being more beneficial than stat boosts we gain from pure leveling. Whereas this strategy of keeping our levels low is very helpful to start with, not being able to use the junction to boost our stats with magic is going to make this run a lot harder later on. The next major part of the game is the Dollet mission, and right away we're joined by Zell and Seifer. We can run away from all random encounters, but there are some mandatory battles against Galbadian soldiers. To avoid receiving experience points to our main characters, we can attack ourselves to knock out both Zell and Squall. This leaves Seifer to receive all the experience points, which is fine since Seifer is a temporary party member anyway. This also means that Seifer is stuck fighting the Anaconda mini boss fight on his own. Fortunately, Seifer gets access to his limit break far easier than any other character. All he needs is 84% of his max HP or less. So we're able to start spamming his limit break early on to win this fight. It was a close one though. Shortly after, Seifer is replaced by a new party member, Selphie. This is the party we have when going up against the next boss, the duo of Biggs and Wedge. Since Seifer left the party, we'll have to revive Squall and Zell with Phoenix Downs. We don't want to heal them too much though, since their low HP will improve their odds of getting limit breaks. The fight starts off with just Biggs, so we use normal attacks until Wedge shows up alongside Biggs. It's worth mentioning that if we hit the R1 button right as Squall's attack connects with the enemy, it will deal extra critical damage. We continue to attack Biggs normally until both Biggs and Wedge are blown away by Elvaret. We carry on the battle seamlessly and Elvaret hits Squall with fire magic right away. Since Squall's HP is getting low, we can get a couple of Renzos off for some fair damage. As we mentioned before, the crisis level is increased the lower our party member's HP. Normally, the amount of hits that Squall's Renzo deals has a chance of increasing depending on how high the crisis level is. However, some bosses like this one have scripted Renzo animations, and thus Squall's Rendo will result in the same number of hits every time. Squall does have a chance of ending each Renzo with a follow-up attack, the likelihood of which is also influenced by the crisis level. Squall learns more of these follow-up attacks as we upgrade his weapon, but for now, Rough Divide is the only one we have access to. Elvaret then breaks out its most powerful attack, Storm Breath. This kills Squall and severely weakens Zell. Now it's time to see Zell's limit break, Duel. It's basically a series of button commands that we can choose from to string together as many of these attacks as we can in a time limit. The amount of time that we get is also directly influenced by the crisis level. The attacks we see on screen here are the most basic duel attacks in the game since we're only near the beginning. Normally, you would need to acquire combat magazines in-game to learn new duel attacks and have them visibly displayed during the duel limit break. However, if we already know the button combinations ahead of time, we can still input them and perform those attacks. Basically, with the power of the internet, we already have access to all of Zell's most powerful duel attacks. It's not as easy as just inputting the commands to use the most powerful attacks over and over though. Certain commands are only available after certain other commands have been input in the sequence already. I won't go into crazy detail as it gets quite complicated, but I'll let you know which string of commands we're going to use and when they are important to the run. For now, we want as much physical damage as possible, and the attack we need for that is Different Beat. Here is an example of a command sequence we can use to get Different Beat. Booyah, Heel Drop, Mac Kick, Heel Drop, Booyah. And now we need to input the button command for Different Beat, even though that attack does not display on screen. That button command is triangle, square, X, circle, up. This deals a good amount of damage, but Zell is downed immediately afterwards. Now it's only Selphie left on her feet, and without Junctioning we can't use revive magic or ore items in battle. However, Selphie's limit break allows her to cast random magic attacks up to 3 times. The higher the crisis level, the more powerful the magic we have to choose from. We use this to deal some more damage, and we can also use this to heal Selphie as well. This ends up being our strategy from here. Use Selphie's limit break to cast magic and heal herself when needed. She hits with normal attacks until she is weak enough to use her limit break again. Rinse repeat this for long enough and eventually Elverette goes down. We're already feeling the difficulty already. Now we have a 30-minute time limit to escape Dollet. All the while we are being chased by the XATM-092 or the Black Widow. So we revive Squall and Zell first. Right away we're forced into fighting the Black Widow outside the communication tower. All we need to do is damage the Black Widow enough to stagger it, and for that we need our limit breaks again. The Black Widow uses Ray Bomb to weaken all 3 party members, and we follow up with a couple of Renzos and a duel. This is enough to stagger the Widow, and we make our escape. This starts a chase sequence where we are being chased by the Widow all the way through Dollet. If it ever catches the party, we must fight it all over again. There are ways to completely avoid fighting it ever again. First, we run away as fast as we can. When we get onto this screen, we must hold down the circle button to walk, so that we don't lose our footing. On the bridge, we must run away until we hear it jump over us. As soon as we hear that, we turn around and run the other way. It then jumps over us one more time, and we head back to the right, and we're home free. You can run inside the hotel to hide from the Widow. This works fine, but if you do that, you miss out on the coolest cutscene in all of video games. We have our dance with Renoa in another cool cutscene. I think every cutscene in this game is cool. And soon it's just Squall and Quistis on the team. We revive Quistis and heal up a little bit as our next boss fight is coming up soon, Grinaldo. Considering what we just went through in Dollet, Grinaldo is pitifully weak in comparison. It's even joined by 3 Raldo enemies, but even then it hardly poses much of a threat. We spam normal attacks to the Raldos until Grinaldo finally deals enough damage to put Squall in limit break range. Several Renzos later and all the enemies go down. Now we have a party of Squall, Zell and Selphie once more. We sell the Occult Fan magazine in Balam Town for 17,500 gil, and we stock up on some potions and Phoenix Downs. Make sure to save 3,000 gil so we can catch the train. Before long, we find ourselves in control of a new party, Laguna, Kiros and Ward. We continue to flee every random encounter, however. Laguna's scenario is only cutscenes from here on, until we are back in control of Squall. We continue the story until we arrive in Timber and meet up with Renoa's resistance. Soon, Renoa is on the team along with her pet dog Angelo. If we enter Renoa's status screen, we can see Angelo's attacks that are used as part of Renoa's limit break. Keep these in mind for later. We continue our mission until we are faced with our next boss, Gero Gero. This boss starts out as the fake president, but it's really slow, and we can get several attacks in over and over until it finally transforms into Gero Gero. It's a lot more dangerous now, and the worst part is it can puke on party members to cause various status effects. One of these status effects is Curse. This gives them a dark glow and completely removes that party member's limit break until the curse wears off. This is a killer, as our normal attacks do terrible damage to Gero Gero. The best method of dealing damage to Gero Gero is to use magic, and only Selphie's limit break can do that in this run. Unfortunately, Selphie is affected with the Berserk status, which forces her to use normal attacks. With Zell being blinded as well, our first attempt was a bust. The new strategy was to attack Selphie before the fake president can transform, so that we can be ready with her limit break as soon as he does. We have Selphie's turn lined up ready to go, whilst Squall and Zell hit the fake president to force the transformation. With Selphie's limit break, the magic attacks on offer are random, and we can mulligan over and over until we see a result that we like. We just happen to find a 3 fire cast, and fire is Gero Gero's weakness. Now, as soon as we see the transformation begin, we can cast those 3 fires for big damage. Squall gets puked on, and on Selphie's next turn, we found 2 fire casts for even more big damage. One more triple cast of fire and Gero Gero is beaten. After leaving the train, we can enter the Timber Pet Shop. Here we purchase pet Pals Volume 3. Do not purchase Pet Pals Volume 4, or we'll just be making this run harder for ourselves. We use Pet Pal Volume 3 from our items to begin learning Rinoa's Invincible Moon. We can now select Invincible Moon from Rinoa's status screen to begin learning it. By default, Rinoa can already use Angelo Cannon. Angelo Strike is available to learn right away since we obtained a Pet Pals magazine automatically in a cutscene, but we need to make sure that we prevent learning Angelo Strike. We'll see why later. Now, any step that we take with Rinoa in the party will make progress towards learning that ability. During our travel to Galbadia Garden, we once again find ourselves in control of Laguna's party. We need to escape Esther, and in the process there are several forced encounters against Esther soldiers. Even though they are forced encounters, they're not considered bosses, so they will reward us with experience points. Since we're trying to remain as low level as possible, we kill off both Laguna and Kiros, and then have Ward win these fights by himself. This ensures that all experience points are only awarded to Ward and no one else. These three characters' levels are actually linked with whichever three characters fall asleep. In this case, Laguna is Squall, Kiros is Selphie, and Ward is Quistis. We flee from all optional battles and have Ward solo all required battles as we make our way to the exit until we find this save point. We save here and head to the left on this screen. We need to find a random encounter against a Gesper. We got lucky and we found it immediately as our first encounter, but if you're not so lucky, then just close the game down completely and boot it back up again and retry for the encounter. Rebooting like this will reset the randomized seed that the encounters are on and should improve the odds of finding Gesper early. Gespers are strange in that they target friend and foe alike with random commands. For example, this one casted both Protect and Cure on Ward. Upon defeat, the Gesper has close to a 70% chance to drop the Black Hole item. This item is going to be essential to this run. The finale of this scenario is a battle against a gauntlet of Esther soldiers. 2 or 3 normal attacks usually put them down, but eventually Ward gets weak. However, Ward's Limit Break, Massive Anchor, is a very strong attack that hits all targets, wiping out any soldier in one. It's a close call, but Ward solos the lot of them. Now we return in control of Squall's party, and right away we use the Black Hole item to teach Quistis a new limit break called Degenerator. This attack completely removes any single target from battle, with the exception of most bosses. Irvine joins the party and we head over to Dealing City. The very first thing we do here is rent a car and drive to the nearby desert right around here. We have Rinoa in our party to help her learn Invincible Moon, and Quistis for her new Degenerator ability. We are now farming for a very specific enemy, and it is called Fastitocalon. It's very common to encounter regular Fastitocalon Fs here, but quite rare to encounter a regular Fastitocalon. What makes this even more awkward is that we don't know which type of Fastitocalon we're fighting until we hit it enough times to make it pop out of the sand. Only on rare occasions will it turn out to be the larger Fastitocalon that pops out of the ground, and even then we still have to kill it and hope it drops the item we need, the water crystal. When we finally found one, it was flanked by 2 Fastitocalon Fs. Squall and Quistis were both knocked out, and Rinoa was weakened, but this allowed Rinoa to use her Limit Break, which randomly selects an attack from Angelo. There's only one attack that can occur by default, and that's Angelo Cannon, which will deal damage to all targets. It took us over an hour, but we finally got the Fastitocalon to drop the water crystal. Better yet, only Rinoa gained any experience points from that fight. We used the water crystal on Quistis to teach her another new Limit Break attack, Aqua Breath. We fast forward to the boss fight against the 2 Iguions, and we only have Squall and Irvine in our party. We started this fight with full HP on both characters, so we'll need weakening before we can use limit breaks. If both Iguions are alive, then they can use their resonance attack for hefty damage to both party members. They can even use Magma Breath, which also hurts, and casts Doom onto the target. With this and resonance back to back, we failed this fight the first time. The second time we tried, they focused focused more on Squall, which allowed him to kill one of the Iguions with a Renzo. Squall got knocked out shortly afterwards, but since one of the Iguions was dead, that removed their resonance attack. Irvine landed normal attacks over and over until he was weak enough to use his limit break. Basically, you select an ammo type that we have in our inventory and spam R1 to rapid fire that ammo into the target. You can switch targets halfway through this limit break. Shot also has a time limit that's influenced by the crisis level. We have a bunch of normal ammo by default, so we unloaded as much of it as we could into the last Iguion. This brings us to Quistis, Selphie and Zell in the sewers underneath Dealing City. But since there's no boss fight down here, this is just a case of fleeing from every random encounter until we escape. It's back to Squall for the next boss, and it's against Seifer. He hits with fire magic and gunblade attacks that hit harder than ours. It isn't long before Squall is weakened, and it seems we only have one chance for a Renzo. If this didn't take Seifer down, then he would hit us one more time and we would lose. Thankfully, the game considered the situation to be dire enough that we got a rough divide at the end of the Renzo. I want you to know something though. I did the math on this fight. Since Squall is level 7, Seifer is level 7, and at level 7, Seifer has 386 HP. Every hit that Squall landed before the rough divide added up to a total of 385, which means Seifer only had 1 HP remaining. We needed that rough divide or we would have lost for sure. Immediately following that boss fight, we have another boss fight, Sorceress Edea. Squall is joined by Renoa and Irvine for this fight, and I'd love to break down some interesting strategy for this battle, but did you know that if Squall goes down in this fight and stays down for a full round, the battle just ends? It's true. Irvine and Renoa turned heel on Squall and dropped him where he stood. The game just moves right along to the following cutscene, where Renoa suddenly decides that she cares about Squall after all. We're in control of Laguna and Kiros once more, but as always, we flee every battle we can to avoid the experience points. There aren't even any boss fights here either, so at the end we get to see Laguna brag that we eliminated 0 monsters. Now we go to Zell, who's going solo for now. We choose to stand up for the Mumba when the security guard gets too violent, and soon after, we must decide if Squall gives in to the torture or not. We choose Let Me Die as it unlocks a shortcut in the prison later. Plus this one text box always amuses me. Now Zell must fight 2 guards by himself, so it's a good thing they're pathetic. They go down after a couple of hits each. That brings us to the next boss fight, and it's against the returning Biggs and Wedge. But at least we get a full party of 3 beforehand. It seems all characters are fully healed automatically at this point, so we will once again need weakening before we can use limit breaks. We target Wedge exclusively with a barrage of normal attacks, and he eventually falls. We do the same to Biggs, and whereas we get a lot of turns before he even gets one, he uses his turns to cast regen and cure on himself. He is now healing himself faster than we are dealing damage, so we take matters into our own hands. We attack Quistis to allow her to use her limit break. Her brand new Aqua Breath deals over 600 damage per hit, and since the amount of damage dealt by Quistis' limit breaks is dependent on the crisis level, 600 is about the lowest damage it can deal. That just goes to show how useful Aqua Breath will be going forward. After the fight, before rescuing Squall, we will travel all the way down to floor 2 to find a strength up item inside one of the cells. This is the first of several strength up items we will get in this run, and we will be giving all of them to Squall to permanently boost his strength stat. You'll see why much later. The next mandatory battle is actually the very next boss fight. We can choose our party ahead of time for this one, and we need to make sure that Quistis is in the party. The fight is against 2 GIM-52A robots and 1 Galbadian soldier. The soldier's job is mainly to buff the robots whilst the robots attack the party. Quistis is still weak from the Biggs and Wedge fight, and she's hit with micro missiles right away. She just survives the hit and fires back with Aqua Breath. It kills the soldier, but not the robots. Luckily, both robots attack Squall and Renoa instead of Quistis, so she's able to use Aqua Breath one more time, and then the others finish them off. There is a chance that this boss drops a missile item for Quistis, but we were unlucky and we didn't get it this time. But don't worry, there will be an opportunity to get one later. Now we divide our 6 characters into 2 parties of 3. We send Squall, Quistis and Irvine to Balam Garden, and we send Selphie, Zell and Renoa to the missile base. Before arriving at the missile base, we need to make sure that Rinoa has finished learning Invincible Moon. If she hasn't yet taken enough steps, you can wander around outside on the nearby train tracks or the roads. This ensures you won't run into any random encounters. Once Invincible Moon has been mastered, we can head inside the missile base. We keep a low profile the whole time we're here, right up until the missiles are ready to launch. We only reveal ourselves when we must, and this is right before the fight against the 3 Galbadian soldiers. Selphie is the closest to getting her limit break, and right away she's hitting them with a volley of strong magic attacks like Thunderer. Zell gets confused and nearly kills Selphie. Due to Selphie's even lower HP, the crisis level has increased and she gets double Thunderja this time. Luckily, Zell hits the right target next time. Zell returns to his senses after being hit by a soldier, but with the 2 weaker soldiers dead, the last one knocks out Selphie. Zell is soon weakened enough to finish the fight with a single duel. We need to find the right control panel next before we can leave this room. This means we can't advance into the next room or backtrack to the previous room until we inspect all the control panels in this room. As soon as we do inspect them all, we backtrack to the save point first. Otherwise, this save point will disappear, and since there is a challenging boss coming up, we're going to want to save the game here. We can also use this opportunity to weaken our party members as much as possible, as we can now get random encounters. The boosted crisis level will be invaluable. We set the place to self-destruct, and we can select a timer. If the timer hits 20 minutes or less, a shortcut will be opened up to get outside quicker. Once we're outside, we face our toughest challenge yet, the boss fight against the BGH251F2, but we'll just call it the tank. To showcase the difficulty of this fight, this was our first attempt. The tank one-shot all 3 of us right away. Our goal is to get Rinoa's turn as early as possible and use her limit break. If the crisis level is high enough, there's a chance that she will use Invincible Moon. Unfortunately, the RNG is not on our side. Either Rinoa dies before getting a turn, or she uses Angelo Cannon instead, which is the much more likely outcome of Rinoa's limit break. The reason we need Invincible Moon is that it makes all surviving party members completely invulnerable to all damage for a few rounds. Since the crisis level is boosted if any party member is downed, we do get Invincible Moon after Selphie dies. This allowed us to get quite close to winning, but the invulnerability wore off right before the tank's beam cannon attack. We need to improve our odds even more. If we're going to get one shot by the tank anyway, then we may as well boost our crisis level as much as possible by weakening our party members all the way ahead of time. We farm random encounters in the missile base and get the enemies to hit us over and over until we're all in critical HP. We even get Selphie down to 16 HP and Rinoa all the way down to 7. This helps Selphie get stronger magic for her limit break, and we jump at the chance for a Thunderja since the tank is weak to lightning damage. Better yet, Rinoa gets Invincible Moon right away with all 3 party members alive. Now Zell and Selphie can spam their limit breaks as often as possible during our invulnerability phase. We use normal attacks with Rinoa as there's a fair chance that she'll just use Invincible Moon again, which does nothing if it's already active. Something very useful to know about this game is that limit breaks take priority over any other turn. If a limit break is selected during the animation of a previous party member's turn, then it doesn't matter if the enemy selected their attack first. The limit break will occur first. This can be used very strategically throughout the whole game. For example, we can skip characters' turns with the triangle button to get another character's turn first. Using this, we can make sure that all our ATB bars are filled up at the same time, and then have Rinoa take the first turn. During the animation of her limit break, we can take the time we need to cycle through Selphie's magic, knowing that as long as we make a selection before the animation is finished, Selphie will still act before the boss. Couple that with the fact that we can spam triangle to skip through characters' turns if they don't have access to their limit break right away, until they eventually do get it. This becomes a bit of a complex balancing act, but after a while, I was enjoying the extra strategic element that this added to the run. It takes a bit of luck, but if we can get an Invincible Moon every time when we need it, then this routine will continue until the tank explodes, revealing 3 soldiers inside. It's at this moment our invulnerability wears off once again. We had Rinoa's limit break lined up ready to go once more, but it ended up being an Angelo Cannon this time. This still damages all 3 targets though and kills 2 of the guards. One duel later and the fight is won. Now we're back at Balam Garden with the other team. We want to immediately leave the garden to get a random encounter. We use this to weaken Quistis and knock out Squall to prevent prevent him from gaining any experience points from the upcoming battles. Upon entering Balam Garden, we first swear our allegiance to the Garden Master to ensure fewer battles, but we still have to participate in a few of them. Most of these battles are simple, but one of them is against a T-Rexor. This is finally where Quistis' Degenerator ability comes into play. As we mentioned, it completely removes an enemy from battle. It doesn't affect every enemy in the game, and most bosses are immune to it, but it does affect most enemies from random encounters, and the T-Rexor is one of them. Using Degenerator to win a battle still earns the party experience points. This is why we made sure Squall was knocked out ahead of time. In fact, speaking of Degenerator, would you believe that one of the very few boss fights in the whole game that Degenerator can actually be used successfully is the very next one against two oil boils. Squall goes down early, but then Quistis cleans up with a Degenerator to each oil boil. It's not long before we're in the next boss fight either, against Garden Master Norg, and this is another tough one. All three party members are healed automatically prior to this fight, which does not help with our crisis level. Plus, there are two orbs changing colour. We must hit them to revert their colour back to the default blue, otherwise Norg will hit us with strong magic. Norg doesn't attack in any other way until we break open his shell, so we can use that time to do damage to Quistis, so that she can use her Aqua Breath. We get to use Aqua Breath a few times for fair damage, but once Norg is exposed, he can hit hard. He wipes out all three party members one at a time. Next time, we decided to not weaken any party members during the first phase, and this time focus on dealing damage until he is exposed once more. We figured that we would let Norg deal the damage that we needed for us to use our limit breaks, and we would hit him with as many normal attacks as we could in the meantime. His water magic is doing the job. First, Irvine is weak enough to use his limit break, and then Quistis is reduced to 2 HP. Her crisis level was now very severe, and this led to her hitting Aqua Breath for over 2,700 damage. Squall got dropped right after, but this only helped to boost the damage from Aqua Breath, and the second time it was over 2,400 damage. That's all she wrote for Norg. We soon arrive at Fisherman's Horizon, and after meeting with the mayor, it isn't long before Galbadia attacks. The mayor tries to take things into his own hands, but this just leads us into a forced fight against 3 Galbadian soldiers. They all go down insultingly easy. Directly afterwards, the tank from the missile base returns, and it can jump apparently, but this tank has seen better days. We can't underestimate it though. The tank still hits hard. We find that the game has topped up our character's HPs before this fight as well. Our goal was to attack it until it weakened us enough for us to start using our limit breaks. However, the tank had other plans. As we were being weakened, the tank used its beam attack. This is strong enough to one-shot Squall and finished off Quistis and Irvine. Our new plan is to use the initial fight against the 3 soldiers to our advantage. During that fight, we attack Quistis to weaken her before the tank fight starts. We leave Squall and Irvine with enough HP to survive 1 or 2 attacks. With Quistis weak, she starts the fight using Aqua Breath. At our party's current average level, the tank will have about 6,000 HP. Aqua Breath's damage will vary with RNG, but it's more likely to do more damage the lower Quistis' HP is. The first one deals over 1,800 damage. Irvine gets a critical hit for over 100 damage, and the second Aqua Breath does over 1,500 damage. This is over 3,400 damage so far. Somehow the tank has not taken a turn yet, and Quistis gets in another Aqua Breath for over 1,700 damage. We've now dealt over 5,000 damage all before the tank could do anything. However, the tank's pilot must have caught wise, and a beam cannon wipes out Quistis. She did good, but now the rest of the damage is up to Squall and Irvine. They both unleashed their normal attacks over and over, and thankfully, the tank blew up before it could kill us. After the fight, we pay a visit to the Grease Monkey in his house nearby. He says he wants to gather the remains of that tank. Then we go to leave Fisherman's Horizon, and Irvine joins us before we get to the exit. If we then revisit the Grease Monkey now, a Galbadian soldier is trying to strong-arm him into repairing the tank. Squall challenges him to a fight, but the soldier escapes through the window. The Grease Monkey will reward you with a Mega Phoenix. Whether we use this in this run or not, I figured I'd show you just in case anyone found this useful. We will be seeing the Grease Monkey again though. Still in Fisherman's Horizon, Irvine is deciding which instruments each party member should play. During this, we have control over Irvine. If we decide to leave this area first and revisit the Grease Monkey one more time, we find that he is being terrorized by that same soldier again. This time, the Grease Monkey himself knocks the soldier out. He rewards us once more, this time with a Phoenix down. We can also mug the soldier for 5 fast ammo, AP ammo, and pulse ammo. In a casual playthrough, we would need 12 pulse ammo for Squall's strongest weapon, but the 5 pulse ammo we get here is the only pulse ammo we can find in the entire game without junctioning, so we'll never be getting Squall's ultimate weapon in this run. We now have control of the garden on the overworld. We form a party of Squall, Irvine and Quistis, and we must now get a few specific item drops to aid us in the run going forward. We pilot the garden all the way to the most southern land on the map, and then we get into a fight so that we can weaken Quistis. We then enter the nearby chocobo forest and get a chocobo. We just pay the kid to catch one for us. We can now ride this chocobo from here all the way to the very top right of the map. Since the chocobo can run through shallow water, we can enter the water from a beach near the desert area, and then we make our way across the edge of the land to the mountains. We need a chocobo to get here due to the mountains being covered in forest, and you can't land the garden in a forest area. We then explore the forests here until we find another chocobo forest. We'll be saving the game here. Now we must begin to farm enemies outside of this chocobo forest. First things first, we kill Squall to prevent him from receiving experience points. Everyone gangs up on him, even the unicorn and the caterpillar help us out. The very next encounter has a cockatrice in it, and we need its cockatrice pinion drop. We use Degenerator to remove the cockatrice from the fight completely and get the cockatrice pinion. This item will be used to upgrade a weapon later. We keep farming encounters right here until we find a Marlboro. We quickly use Degenerator on it before it has a chance to use its signature bad breath attack, which would have been a disaster. This earns us the Marlboro Tentacle, and we can use this item from our inventory right away to teach Quistis the bad breath attack. Now we need to farm Hexadragon enemies for their red fangs. Unfortunately, at our current party level, the red fangs are the Hexadragon's rare drop. If we don't get the red fang drop that we need, we end up with more experience points on Quistis and Irvine than we want. We could reload the game after every Hexadragon we find, but since the randomized seed the game is on is the same with every reload, the encounter and the item drop will be the same every time. To increase our odds, we can save the game and completely reboot the game to reset the randomized seed. The farming can continue from there. The red fangs have less than a 20% chance of dropping. If we find a Hexadragon and the drop is not a red fang, that's when we need to reboot the game. We repeat this until we finally get 2 red fangs that we need. It was pretty clutch too, because we got back attacked and Irvine died immediately. Quistis managed to get a Degenerator off before the same thing happened to her, and we got both red fangs at the same time. Once again, we'll be holding on to these items for some weapon upgrades later on. Now we can get another chocobo and travel all the way back to the garden again. We fly the garden back to Balam and then swap Irvine for Zell. We revive Squall but only heal him a little bit. Then we get another encounter outside the town and weaken both Zell and Quistis. Now, normally you would have to solve some kind of puzzle to find where Raijin is hiding. This would involve talking to the fishing guards, going to Zell's house, getting a dog to get the fish scent off us, etc. But there's actually a way to completely skip this entire puzzle. If we just transition the screen back and forth between the center of town and the hotel entrance for a total of 17 times, the guards outside the hotel are now in a completely different stance. Talking to them now will prompt Raijin to turn up and the puzzle is skipped. We now have a boss fight against Raijin and 2 soldiers at the same time. Raijin has some fairly strong physical attacks, but the plan is to get Quistis to use bad breath, which targets all enemies. This has a chance of inflicting several status ailments. The 2 soldiers were put to sleep, blinded, silenced, poisoned and doomed, and Raijin was also blinded. Raijin will now miss a lot of his attacks, and Quistis takes out the 2 guards with a single aqua breath. It's now Zell's time to shine. There is another dual command sequence that will prove very useful in this run. There is a particular command called Meteor Strike, and it deals 25% of the target's current HP. So for example, if the target had 4000 HP remaining, Meteor Strike will deal 1000 damage. There just so happens to be a specific sequence of commands that allows us to use Meteor Strike as many times as we can fit within the duel's time limit. This means that we can take huge chunks of HP off the target with this combo. However, despite Meteor Strike being a physical attack, it does not work on enemies that are immune to gravity damage. Most bosses are immune to gravity damage, but not all of them. A good example of bosses that are vulnerable to gravity damage are most humanoid enemies, just like Raijin. So here's the combo. The first command will depend what shows on screen. If Punch Rush is displayed, we start with that. If Booyah is displayed, then we start with that instead. Booyah is directly after Punch Rush anyway, so the combo will be the same following following the Booyah. After Booyah, we used Meteor Strike, which is down circle, up circle. We follow that with a Heal Drop, another Meteor Strike, a Dolphin Blow, which is L1, R1, L1, R1, then Meteor Strike, Heal Drop, so on and so forth. Basically, after Booyah, we use Meteor Strike every other command, and the commands in between Meteor Strikes will alternate between Heal Drop and Dolphin Blow. This assures that we can use Meteor Strike as many times in a single use of duel as possible. You can see that against Raijin, the damage that Meteor Strike deals heavily outweighs the damage of any other of Zell's attacks, but also the amount of damage that each Meteor Strike deals will gradually reduce due to 25% of the target's current HP being a lower number each time Meteor Strike lands. This still heavily weakens Raijin in this fight. Raijin responds by trying to take Zell down, but he misses due to being blinded. One more Aqua Breath and Raijin goes down. Without a break in between, we are thrusted straight into a boss fight against both Raijin and Fujin together. Before we even get a turn, Fujin used Tornado and killed us all outright. Failing here means we have to do both fights again. We can save ourselves a bit of time by using the save point in Zell's house after the guards have changed their stance, but this will also fully heal the party. This can still work though. We just need to take the time to reduce Quistis and Zell's HP first in the first Raijin fight. Zell gets in a duel to deal a lot of damage to Raijin, but Squall and Zell are both defeated shortly afterwards. Quistis is on her own now, but the more dead characters we have in our party, the higher the likelihood that the remaining character will get their limit break, and the higher their HP can be and still get it. This means we can get Bad Breath and Aqua Breath back to back. Also, Raijin won't attack female party members if there's only one female party member still standing. This basically means that Raijin can't touch us at this point. It also means that we have to go straight into the fight against both of them with just Quistis. Right away, Fujin uses Tornado again, but since Quistis had slightly more HP this time, she just manages to survive. 2 dead party members and a very weak Quistis means the crisis level right now is very high. We very quickly use Bad Breath, which puts Fujin to sleep, but doesn't do much to Raijin at all. But Raijin still won't hit any female if there's only one still standing. Now we spam Aqua Breath as many times as we can before Fujin wakes up. The high crisis level results in massive damage. Raijin will heal himself with high potions, but Aqua Breath out damages his healing. Physical attacks will wake up sleeping targets, but Aqua Breath is not considered a physical attack. A total of 3 Aqua Breaths is enough to defeat both of them. We receive a strength up item for each time we defeated Raijin, so that's 2 more for Squall to further boost his strength stat. After many cutscenes, we are now at war with Galbadia. We make sure to flee all random encounters as usual, and when prompted, we make sure to keep Quistis in the party. We take the time to kill Squall in a random encounter before we must fight a mandatory battle against 4 stronger soldiers. Squall being dead improves our crisis level and prevents him from gaining experience points. Quistis gets hit with silence, but all that does is prevent her from using magic, and we can't use magic in this run anyway. We end up benefiting from this, as having a status effect on Quistis boosts her crisis level, and thus makes Aqua Breath more powerful. After 2 Aqua Breaths, Quistis takes down all 4 of them, and not a moment too soon. When we find ourselves inside Galbadia Garden, we form a party of Squall, Quistis, and Irvine and progress through until we make it to the central area near the entrance. We can save the game here, but we need to farm an item right here before we leave. Just make sure not to bump into Cerberus right in the center of the area. We're looking for a Death Claw to get its sharp spike drop. We want to kill off Squall first to once again prevent him from gaining experience points, and have Quistis use Degenerator. We had Irvine with us as our 3rd party member both here and for the other item farming that we did earlier, so that he would gain a share of the experience points. This isn't to level him up specifically, but it's to prevent another party member from gaining those experience points instead, as we want to ensure their levels are kept as low as possible for now. Once we have the sharp spike, we swap Irvine for Zell, and we revive Squall, ready for our battle with Seifer. Right away we use Zell's Duel, and since Seifer is a humanoid enemy, he is susceptible to gravity attacks, which means we can use the same combo that we used against Raijin with the multiple meteor strikes. Since Zell's HP was so low, we got a decent amount of time, and after that, all it took was an Aqua Breath and a Renzo to finish off Seifer. Shortly following that fight, we must fight both Seifer and Sorceress Edea back to back. We went into this fight with the same strategy strategy we just used. A single duel took down Sifa. A few seconds after Sifa is defeated, Adia will always use Maelstrom. Since this deals percentage damage, it won't actually kill any party member, but it inflicts the curse status on all targets. This is a killer, because the curse status removes the ability to use limit breaks, and we really want to use another duel on her. Basically, if she uses Maelstrom and inflicts us all with curse, you may as well reset. In the rematch, we were able to get Zell's duel lined up and ready to use immediately after Cypher was defeated, but we didn't have enough time to deal enough damage, and Adia used Maelstrom again right afterwards. Instead, we swap Quistis with Renoa before the fight, and we use some random encounters in the area to weaken Renoa. The plan is to use Renoa's Invincible Moon and make the party immune to Maelstrom, and that is exactly what happened. Then we spammed Jewel and Renzo a few times and Adia was defeated. Now we're back in control of the garden. We form a party of Squall, Quistis and Irvine and fly to the area outside Dollet. We need to farm some Gizzards here because we want them to drop some screws. As soon as we find one, we kill off Squall and Irvine and have Quistis use Degenerator. If there are multiple Gizzards in one fight, then Aqua Breath should be enough to defeat them all. We keep this up until we have 12 screws in total. Now we want to do something that we've been putting off until now. We must complete Odin's Tower. We swap Irvine for Selfie and heal up a little bit. We have a time limit here, so we won't be using the speed up booster. We flee every encounter as usual, and after we solve the tower's puzzle, we input the password to open the door to Odin's room. If our timer is running low, then an option we have here is to leave the tower and re-enter. The timer will reset, but the door to Odin's room will remain open. This ensures we have the maximum possible time to defeat Odin. Odin never actually attacks at all. The challenge of this fight is purely defeating him within the time limit. This is why we didn't need Renoa, as Invincible Moon wouldn't help us. We need as much damage as possible. Odin won't take any gravity damage either, so Zell's out too. We just spam Renzo's, Aqua Breaths, and Selfie's randomized magic instead. After this, Odin will join the team as a summon, but the unique thing about Odin is that we don't need to use Junction to summon him. Odin will spawn at the beginning of a battle randomly, and insta-kill all enemies in that battle when he does. There is a flat 12.9% chance of Odin spawning, but of course Odin will not spawn for the vast majority of boss fights. We soon end up in control of Laguna, Kiros and Ward again. We want to assign Selfie to Kiros and Irvine to Ward. After winning a fight against a Ruby Dragon in a mini-game, we must fight it for real. We have the option to backtrack slightly and save the game first. Before we fight the Ruby Dragon, we find a random encounter and kill off Laguna and Kiros. You would be forgiven for assuming that the Ruby Dragon was a boss fight, since it is a mandatory fight to progress. But the game considers this to be a normal enemy. This means the fight will award experience points, which is why we killed off Laguna and Kiros, and also why we assigned Irvine to Ward. Basically, Irvine is our experience point sponge for any mandatory battles, but this means that Ward must go this fight alone, although Ward would really struggle to win this one by himself. But since this isn't a boss fight, that means that 12.9% chance that Odin will spawn at the start of the fight can end this fight right away. We just need to keep reloading the game every time that Odin fails to spawn until he finally decides to help us out, and one-shot the Ruby Dragon. We gain control of the garden again, and at this point we realised we don't have a Dino Bone in our inventory, and we need one for later. It was possible to get a Dino Bone in the T-Rexor encounter back in the garden when the Garden Master was taking over, but we were unlucky back then. We weaken Quistis and kill off Squall, and we farm a T-Rexor encounter in the forest outside Balam. The first one we find, we use Degenerator and we got a Dino Bone. After some more cutscenes, we can now put Adia in our party, so we'll swap Irvine for Adia. Now is normally the time that we would weaken the party, but we want to be able to survive a few hits from the upcoming boss fight, Abaddon. This thing has strong physical attacks and it can use them surprisingly frequently. It can also use a lick attack for moderate damage and to cause the curse status effect. Since Abaddon is an undead enemy, it takes damage from healing spells and items. In a casual playthrough, we would just throw an elixir or an X potion at it for an instant kill, but Junctioning is required to use items in battle, so that's a no-go. Now and then Abaddon will swap from crouching to standing upright. and this boosts its vitality stat. Squall's rendered useless in this instance. Our best chance is Adea's limit break, Ice Strike, since it deals good magic damage. The damage isn't influenced by the crisis level, so we can guarantee good damage from it every time. This also means that if Adea gets licked and cursed, this attempt is pretty much dead. Curse can wear off over time, but by then Abaddon will likely have killed us all. Abaddon killed Squall, but we managed to get an Ice Strike in early. Quistis took a heavy hit and nearly died, but she followed up with an Aqua Breath. One more Ice Strike for big damage and Abaddon is down. We're right back to Laguna, Kiros and Ward, so we assign Quistis to Kiros and Irvine to Ward. Since Squall was dead before this scene, the game revives Laguna with 1 HP. Thankfully, Laguna's limit break, Desperado, one-shots the Esther soldiers, so we win this fight as long as we get our turn first. Kiros and Ward join the next fight, and they are fully healed. We still want to avoid experience points for both Laguna and Kiros though, so we kill both of them off. Ward will attack the enemies over and over until he is hit with confusion. Thankfully, he still only attacks the enemy, and when confusion wears off, he is weak enough to use his limit break to win the fight. Ward must win the next fight completely solo. He takes a couple of hits, but his massive anchor drops the 2 soldiers. Ward survives the laser attack, and it takes 2 more massive anchors to finally defeat the robot. This also happens to be the battle that earned us the 100 kill trophy. I imagine that normally comes a fair bit earlier in the game casually. Ward lands a few more massive anchors on the Esther soldiers. We had to use a single potion first for safety, which was needed as Ward would have died otherwise. We find ourselves back with Squall and co in the city of Esther. We head to the shops to buy a few things for safety. They are 40 high potions, 30 phoenix downs, eye drops, softs and remedies. What's important though is that we purchase over 40 dark ammo for Irvine's limit break much later on. This is also the time to upgrade Squall's weapon to the Twin Lance, using the Dino Bone, 2 Red Fangs and 12 screws that we gathered earlier. This will give Squall a decent strength boost and give him access to a couple of different attacks at the end of his limit break. Next, we rent a car and drive close to the space station. Here we can farm encounters outside until we find Mesmerizes. We want one of them to drop a Mesmerize blade, which is the last item we need to create a new weapon for Rinoa. Squall and Quistis are both down, so Adea solos them both for the Mesmerize blade. We could go back to Esther now to create the new weapon for Rinoa. It requires the Cockatrice Pinion, a Mesmerize blade, and a Sharp Spike, all of which we acquired in this run. I actually forgot to go back to Esther here and make this weapon, but I highly recommend that you do it now to be safe. The extra attack power will help Rinoa out when she is next playable. We choose to take Selphie into space with Squall and Rinoa, and this leaves Zell, Quistis, and Irvine and Adea in Esther. Soon, the lunatic Pandora arrives in Esther, so we bring Irvine with us as we infiltrate it. This is now the last chance we have at obtaining the missile item, as we can now find random encounters against Galbadian soldiers and their robots. The specific robot we need to defeat is the GIM-52A, and we found 2 of them together with a single soldier. Adea's limit break is so strong that she wiped out the first robot. The second one then used Ray Bomb and killed Irvine. The soldier used Meltdown on Zell, and now both Zell and Adea are very weak. Adea hits one more Ice Strike on the second robot, but it just survives. Adea then goes down, but we managed to use Zell's duel in time. The crisis level was high, and we got the maximum time on the duel countdown. We made sure to target the soldier since he was at full HP. The plan was to use a combo of attacks that ended with the Burning Rave attack. This is because the Burning Rave attack targets all enemies, and since the robot was so weak after surviving the Ice Strike, this would have had the best odds at defeating both enemies at once. We made sure to get in the Meteor Strikes after a Mac kick and a Punch Rush, and then we went straight in for the Burning Rave. The robot died, but the soldier only just survived. Thankfully, this soldier is so slow, Zell got another duel in before he got a turn. It was close, but it was worth it as we got the missile drop. We enter the lunatic Pandora. Remember to use the missile on Quistis so she learns the micro missile ability, and then the mobile Type 8 robot knocks us off the lunatic Pandora. After some lengthy cutscenes, we find ourselves with a party of just Squall and Rinoa aboard the Ragnarok. It's here we must defeat 8 of these creatures called Propagators. They come in 4 different colours, 2 per colour. We need to defeat any 2 that are the same colour back to back for them to stay dead. If we kill any out of order, they will respawn. At the bottom of the stairs, there is a purple one, but we need to make sure to wait for it to walk away so we can run through this door before it can catch us. In this room, there is a green one and a save point. We fight the green one in hopes that we can get access to the save point after defeating it, but sometimes these Propagators get several turns in a row and they wipe us out. Upon returning to this room, we try to to bait the propagator so we can run around it and to the save point, and even in this tiny room, we pulled it off. Now when we game over and reload, Squall is at the save point and Rinoa is at the door. She runs over to Squall right away and runs straight into the propagator, which initiates the battle, despite the fact we never moved. Basically, we're not going anywhere until we kill this thing. Easier said than done. We need to hope that the propagator spends turns casting Silence and Blind on Squall and Rinoa. These status effects don't hinder us at all. Actually, fun fact, Squall can never miss a normal attack, whether he's blinded or not. Squall being blinded prevents him from hitting critical hits with R1, but we still get critical hits during Renzo regardless. So Silence and Blind will just help Squall boost his crisis level instead. This section of the game is exactly the reason we gave Squall all those strength up items, and it's the reason we went out of our way to upgrade Squall's weapon. Without that extra attack power, we wouldn't stand any chance against these propagators. After several attempts, Squall just managed to live long enough to use Renzo twice, and since he had such low HP, he ends the first Renzo with his new Blasting Zone attack, and the second Renzo he ends with his new Fated Circle attack. This was enough to defeat the first propagator, and what's more, not only is Squall on very low HP, but he's still silenced and blinded. This continues to boost Squall's crisis level so much that his Renzos hit more times and often end in powerful finishes. This helps us defeat the remaining propagators one by one. Since Squall is one hit away from death the entire time, we make sure to return to the save point to save after every propagator we kill. Some of these fights can be tricky if they insist on hitting Squall first, but if we're lucky, that 12.9% chance can kick in and Odin will insta-kill one or two of them for us. It's worth noting that Rinoa's dog Angelo isn't with the party right now, since we're in space, and as a result, Rinoa can't use her usual limit breaks. She does have access to a new limit break called Angel Wing, but this just allows Rinoa to cast random magic with increased effectiveness. However, unlike Selphie, it must be magic that Rinoa has already acquired, and without junctioning, she can't acquire any magic. Once all the propagators are dead and all the cutscenes are done, the party members are reunited. It's time to break into the Lunatic Pandora, and we do so with a party of Squall, Quistis, and Irvine. But first, we need to weaken our party since they've been fully healed. As soon as we do enter the Lunatic Pandora, we must have a rematch against Raijin and Fujin. Squall goes down immediately, but Quistis hit a bad breath right after, which blinds Raijin and puts him to sleep. It completely missed Fujin though. Irvine followed up by using his dark ammo that we purchased to use Dark Shot on Fujin. This has a chance to blind, silence, and put the target to sleep with each shot. With both Raijin and Fujin asleep, we must avoid normal attacks as that will wake them up. Quistis uses Micro Missile, which is perfect to use here, as it deals at least 50% of the target's current HP. But with Squall being dead, the boosted crisis level can increase that percentage even more. It can only hit them one at a time though, but it does cause heavy damage, and it doesn't wake them up. After a total of 3 Micro Missiles, Fujin wakes up and casts haste on Raijin. We were ready with another Dark Shot to put her right back to sleep. One more missile on Fujin and Raijin wakes up, killing Irvine as soon as he does. We go from missiles to Aqua Breath now, as we want to damage them both. Fujin goes down, but Raijin survived, and since he has haste, he now acts fast with 2 attacks in a row. But he's still blinded, so Quistis dodges both attacks and then takes him down with a final Aqua Breath. With 2 dead party members and a blinded Quistis, the crisis level ensures big damage and finishes Raijin off. Now we want to switch up the team. We go with Squall, Rinoa, and Zell. We revive Squall and weaken Rinoa and Zell at a later save point. We continue through the Lunatic Pandora until we encounter our next boss, Mobile Type 8. This is a tough boss, but it has a big weakness. It's susceptible to gravity attacks. This means that the usual dual combo from Zell with the numerous meteor strikes works very well. Unfortunately, it's going to take more than a single duel to take it down. That's why we need Rinoa to use Invincible Moon to keep us alive. Otherwise, Mobile Type 8 will counter any of our offensive attacks and limit breaks with Twin Homing Laser, which easily defeats us. Because this is a counter attack, it takes priority over any queued up limit breaks too. This means that we need Invincible Moon before Zell's first duel. The weaker Rinoa is, the better odds we have of getting that Invincible Moon. Squall goes down on the enemy's first turn, but Rinoa gets Invincible Moon on her first turn. From there, Zell uses Duel every turn he gets. We barrage it with as many meteor strikes as we can until its HP is whittled all the way down to almost single digits, and the Invincible Moon ensures that we take 0 damage from all of its counterattacks. The last meteor strike of the third duel dealt 3 points of damage, so we knew its remaining HP was pitiful. The invincibility wore off before our next attack, but Renoa was able to land one, and that was the final hit we needed to finish it off. Thankfully, it does not counter-attack after it's defeated. Now that mobile type 8 is down, Sifa is waiting for us in the very next area, but we actually want to backtrack to the Ragnarok. Throughout the whole run so far, we've heavily limited the amount of experience points that we've earned. This was of course due to most of the enemies in this game getting stronger the higher our party's average level is. We've ensured that almost all enemies in the game up to now have been as low level as they possibly can be, otherwise this run would have been next to impossible. However, now is the time to throw that strategy out the window. We form a party of Squall, Quistis and Selfie. We use the Ragnarok to fly to either the island closest to heaven or the island closest to hell. These two islands contain some of the strongest random encounters in the game, but a weakened Quistis can one-shot anything with her Degenerator ability. We will farm encounters here and Quistis will solo each and every enemy we run into. Of course, we will save our game after every fight that we win, so that if any of our party members die, we could just reload and try again. We continue this until we get these three characters to a very high level. You can take all three of them to level 100 if you want to, but we absolutely want Selfie to be level 80 or above at least. Between level 80 and 89 might be preferable for Selfie, but going to level 100 is still fine. We don't need Renoa to be level 100 right now. We will have an opportunity to return here to grind her up later, but feel free to grind her up now if you really want to. You can grind the other party members to their max level 2 if you want, but leveling up Zell or Irvine at this point won't really help much. This will give any character that we grind up a significant boost in stats, but since enemies get stronger the more levels we gain, we're still very much outmatched by almost everything. The game intended the player to both level up and use the junction system to boost our stats after all. We also get a lot of item drops from this grind too. We can use the 2 Malboro tentacles from the Malboros and 2 dragon skins from the Hexadragons to make a new weapon for Quistis, the Red Scorpion. We also decided to get an Adamantite from the Adamantoise on the beach near Dollet. With that, along with 4 more dragon skins and a Fury fragment that we got from grinding Ruby Dragons, we can make a new weapon for Zell, the Urgis. Now we are ready to return to the Lunatic Pandora and take on Sifa for the last time. We go in with a party of Squall, Renoa and Selfie. We fully heal Squall to his new maximum HP of over 4,000 ahead of the fight. This is just so that Squall can tank a few hits if needed. Renoa must be weakened a lot though. Since we have Odin, he will be summoned in automatically at the start of this fight, only to be cut in half by Sifa. The boss fight then truly begins. Since we have grinded a lot of levels, Sifa's stats are also very high, so we still find ourselves outmatched. Zell's meteor strikes are useless this time around as Sifa has developed an immunity to gravity attacks this time. Sifa attacks often, so we need Renoa to use Invincible Moon as early as possible. Otherwise, Sifa will make short work of us all with fast gunblade attacks or fire magic. We included Selfie in this party as her limit break was our backup strategy, but she is killed very early on. Renoa then gets 2 Invincible Moons in a row right afterwards. This ensures that we survive many of Sifa's rapid fire attacks. But did you know that if the party is still alive after Sifa has attacked 13 times, Gilgamesh is automatically summoned to defeat Sifa? This still happens if you deplete all of Sifa's HP, but I didn't know it happened after 13 of his turns. This is where his rapid attacks actually work in our favour, as he's only speeding up his own defeat whilst we're invincible. This is also why it didn't really matter what our levels were for this fight, since it was going to end after 13 turns anyway. The next boss fight follows very shortly after, but we will first backtrack to the save point. We've actually lost Renoa at this point in the game, as Adele has merged with her, and she won't return to the party until Adele is defeated. We need to prepare for that boss fight first though. Near the previous save point, there is a tunnel entrance. This tunnel is just a dead end, but there is a specific enemy that we can encounter very regularly in this tunnel, the Imp. We add Quistis to the party and farm encounters against imps. The reason for this is that they can cast both blind and silence on the party. As soon as we find one, we do nothing and let it take its turns. It's a good idea to fully heal before to ensure it can't one-shot us. They can also cast other status magic like Berserk or Confuse, but those statuses don't remain after battle, unlike Silence and Blind. The strategy is to get Selfie both silenced and blinded. We went a bit overboard and got status on everybody, but we only really needed it for Selfie right now. With that, we are ready to face Sorceress Adele. Without Renoa, we cannot rely on Invincible Moon. Adele has merged with Renoa Renoa, which means we must avoid using attacks that hit all targets. Otherwise, we will damage Renoa. If Renoa dies here, it's game over. What's more, Adele will start the fight by absorbing HP from Renoa and then casting Meteor immediately afterwards. Since we were trying to get Selphie's limit break, we went in with low HP and Meteor wiped us out. The new strategy is to heal a bit of HP first so we can survive the Meteor. Meteor hits a total of 10 times and each hit is spread across the surviving party members. This makes it difficult to know the best amount of HP to go into the fight with, so we had to use a bit of trial and error. Our plan for victory, however, is to use the most powerful spell that Selphie's limit break can do, and it's called the End. Selphie's limit break is the only legitimate method in the game of casting this spell, and all it does is instantly win any fight immediately, even boss fights. Of course, this sounds completely overpowered, but there's a catch. Remember how we mentioned that the magic that Selphie gets with her limit break is random, and we can choose do-over to mulligan the spell that we get? Well, to add a bit more explanation to it, there are 16 tables of magic, and each table contains 64 magic spells. Each time we choose do-over, it re-randomizes both the table and the magic spell within that table. The list of magics change depending on Selphie's level, but even at level 100, the End only appears in 3 of these tables, twice in 2 of them and once in the remaining one. Since both the table and the spell that we get are randomized every time, the odds of getting the End are very slim, let alone getting it before whatever boss we're up against kills us first. There is a bit more to Selphie's limit break than that, but we'll go into further details later on. Since you will likely be hitting do-over rapidly whilst looking for the End, it's also very possible to accidentally skip over it and you can't go back. One benefit we have is that the animation for Meteor is quite long, and if Selphie's turn comes up before it's cast, we can quickly search for the End during the Meteor animation. We also healed up both Squall and Quistis to full HP to help them tank at least a hit or two. We healed up Selphie a bit, but not to the maximum. The reason we wanted double status on Selphie was to boost her chance of getting her limit break straight away without her being in critical HP. And sure enough, after many failed attempts, we got the End as our very first spell right at the start of the fight. But, as we said, as soon as the fight starts, Adele absorbs HP from Renoa and then goes straight into casting Meteor. This bypasses the usual priority that limit breaks have, so Selphie must survive this Meteor before she can cast the End, which she does! She had just the right amount of HP to both be able to use her limit break under double status and to still survive the Meteor attack. With that, we get to enjoy the animation of the End as it defeats Adele instantly. Something else to note, Selphie loses access to the End if she is between level 40 and 80. The highest odds of her getting the End are when she's between levels 80 and 89, but levels 90 to 100 still work. This is why we mentioned that leaving Selphie between level 80 and 89 might be preferable. We get a chance to save our game, but there's no going back from here. We have another boss fight right away. We're able to change our party members, so we go with Squall, Quistis and Irvine. We must fight a gauntlet of sorceresses. They spawn in one at a time to replace the defeated one, but there can only ever be 2 sorceresses in battle at any one time. The idea is to use Irvine's limit break to dark shot each sorceress one at a time. Dark shot also has a chance to poison enemies as well as put them to sleep. This buys us the time we need to weaken Quistis so that she can finish off the sorceresses with Aqua Breath. When Irvine's turns come back around, we save it, and as soon as a new sorceress replaces a defeated one, we quickly use his limit break to get a dark shot on the new sorceress. We make sure to only use a couple of dark shots per sorceress to conserve ammo. A couple of shots should be all that we need to put them to sleep anyway. It's best to use dark shot when there are 2 sorceresses in the fight so we can hit them both in a single turn. We can use Squall's Renzo now and then to finish one of them off if an Aqua Breath doesn't quite cut it. And sometimes even Gilgamesh will spawn in to attack as well. Gilgamesh has replaced Odin now, and he can attack in the middle of fights sometimes instead of just at the start. The last sorceress is the strongest one by far, and we can't put this one to sleep, but this final sorceress is also locked at level 45 no matter what. If we attack this last sorceress, she will counterattack for big damage. We barraged her with our limit breaks, but her counterattacks killed us off very quickly. Instead of attacking right away, what we need to do is withhold our turns until a 5-turn countdown starts. As soon as this countdown starts, she no longer counterattacks. If her countdown hits 0, she will cast Ultima, which will wipe us out for sure. This is the time to unleash micro missiles and Renzos. The missiles do massive percentage damage, and a Renzo will always do 7 hits in this fight. We do this as many times as we can during the countdown, and we just managed to finish her off before the timer hit 0. That was a close one. This is also the point in the game where we can warp back to the overworld using one of 3 portals. The middle portal can lead us to a Chocobo forest, and a Chocobo can get us back to the Ragnarok. This is the last opportunity we have to grind, so if you haven't already, make sure Renoa is level 100, as that can boost our chances of getting Invincible Moon. Now we enter the final dungeon, Ultima Seer's Castle. Upon entering the castle, we instantly lose access to a lot of in-game actions and abilities. As long as we're inside the castle, we can't use summons, magic, items, or even limit breaks. And we can't even save the game in the castle. Of course, no limit breaks is our biggest issue here. There are several mini-bosses throughout this castle, and defeating each one of them allows us to unlock one of our abilities. We can also switch between 2 parties of 3 in this castle at these green circles. The party we took for the first mini-boss had Squall, Quistis, and Irvine in it. Upon reflection, it probably made more sense to take Selphie over Irvine, since she was a higher level, but it doesn't change much. The first mini-boss, Sphinxara, is right upstairs. With all of our abilities locked, the game has forced us to only be able to use normal attacks. This would still be the same in a casual run, so all we can do is attack it over and over. Since we can't use limit breaks yet, we go into this fight fully healed so we can take as many hits as possible. Squall is our biggest damage dealer here, so we need to make sure that every time he lands a hit, we press R1 for that critical damage. Partway through, Sphinxara will summon a monster to help it, but it's best to ignore it and focus all attacks on the Sphinxara still. Sphinxara can also cast both Zombie and Doom. However, if it casts Zombie on a party member who already has the Doom effect, it removes the Doom status. This is an example of how Sphinxara can just waste its turn sometimes. It can also put us to sleep too, but the inactivity in battle can sometimes cause Gilgamesh to turn up and deal some extra damage for us, although we probably don't want the small monster to die, because if it does, then Sphinxara will summon a more powerful skeleton in its place. Irvine dies and Quistis very nearly did, but eventually we landed enough hits to take Sphinxara down. The monster it summons dies along with it too. After the win, we can pick one of our locked abilities to unlock. Of course, we select limit breaks. We can exit the castle to save the game and reform our parties. This time we set party 1 as Squall, Zell and Quistis, and then we switch to party 2 for the other 3 characters. We head upstairs and walk over the chandelier to drop it down and break open a trapdoor. Heading down there will put us against the second mini-boss, Tri-Point. We enter this fight with Irvine already down and a weakened Selphie and Renoa. This helped Renoa get Invincible Moon right away. Selphie will use this time to begin searching for the end. When Renoa's turn comes back around, we use Angel Wing purely for the lengthy animation, and this gives Selphie even more time to search. Invincible Moon will also remove the status effects from Selphie, but regardless of that, we eventually find the end before the invincibility wears off, and we win this fight with that. The second ability we unlock is Resurrection. It might seem like this doesn't matter much, but you'll see why it does soon. Once again, we leave the castle to save the game, but we don't change the party members. Squall, Quistis and Zell can hold the lever to keep the chandelier in place, and Selphie, Renoa and Irvine can travel over the chandelier to the other side. The next mini-boss, Krista, is waiting right here on the balcony. This was our first attempt at this boss. Right away, Renoa used Angelo Cannon instead of Invincible Moon, which was unfortunate, but Selphie got the end after hitting do-over only 4 times. That was very lucky, but we noticed that Krista killed Renoa first, which means that was a counter-attack. It didn't matter though, because Selphie got the end in right afterwards. However, I had forgotten that this boss has a desperation attack that it uses after it dies, and that attack is Ultima. It took Selphie down along with it, and then it teased us by showing us Krista's death animation right before the game over screen. In the rematch, we need to get Invincible Moon first to survive this. It took several attempts, but the stars finally aligned, we got Invincible Moon, and then the end. The Ultima attack doesn't hurt us, and that's our third ability unlocked. We select Save this time, as we want to be able to save the game before the final boss. These are all the abilities we'll need, so we can now travel all the way through the castle to the very end. We do this with Party 2 that consists of Zell, Irvine and Quistis. Right before the final boss, there is one last save point. This save point will actually revive any dead characters with 1 HP, but only if we unlocked the resurrection ability. This means that if we kill off each character one at a time, we can use the save point to revive them all with 1 HP, which allows them to be at the highest possible crisis level. With that, we enter the final boss room. The final boss against Ultimacia is very difficult. This battle has 4 main phases, and each one presents its own challenges. The 3 characters that start this fight are selected at random, but if any of them die and stay dead for long enough, they are replaced with another character. Her first form is the easiest, but you'll still need Invincible Moon early on to avoid being cursed by her Maelstrom attack. The reason I say this is the easiest form is because she is susceptible to gravity attacks. This means that both Quistis and Zell can deal heavy damage with micro missiles or meteor strikes. This wouldn't help in phase 2 onwards though, as all phases after this are immune to gravity. If we had Selphie and Rinoa in the fight, we could use the usual method of searching for the end whilst we're invincible. However, we would need to get very lucky to have the game randomly put them both in the fight at the start. Also, as we mentioned, this fight has 4 phases. This means we would have to get the end 4 times, 1 in each phase. This would require immense amounts of luck. It was bad enough just getting it once for the previous bosses, not to mention that we would need even more luck with Rinoa getting Invincible Moon again after it wears off each time. If Rinoa uses Invincible Moon whilst already invincible, it won't refresh the effect, it just misses instead. We can't even start getting this string of immense luck if we don't get both Rinoa and Selphie at the beginning of the fight anyway. Basically, our best strategy involves an absurd amount of RNG. Getting the end is still the preferred method to victory here. Ultimacia's 4 phases are simply too powerful to defeat in a no junction run otherwise. So, that means it's time to learn about RNG manipulation. First things first, we want Squall, Selphie and Rinoa to be the 3 chosen to start the fight. Would you believe the method the game uses to decide the starting party members is the step count? Depending on the number of steps we've taken since last booting up the game, we will start with a different trio. Knowing this, we can reboot the game at the save point and take a specific number of steps before entering the door. The number we're looking for can vary, but once we find that right number of steps, that exact number of steps should work every time. After some experimenting, we found that 10 steps forward, 7 steps diagonally, and then running forward got us the 3 characters we wanted. If Rinoa doesn't get Invincible Moon right away, we may as well reload and try again. But if she does, we can start manipulating Selphie's limit break. We mentioned there are 16 tables, each with 64 magic attacks, and each time we choose do-over, it randomizes the table and then randomizes the magic within that table. There is an exception to this. If we select Selphie's limit break during an animation, like Squall's blasting zone for example, it randomizes the table as normal. However, if we then choose do-over, it won't re-randomize the table as long as that same animation is still occurring. Instead, choosing do-over will simply go to the very next magic attack in the list of 64 magics within that same table. It's only when the animation finishes that do-over will re-randomize the table again. This means that if we knew what all 64 magics were in these 16 tables in their exact order, we would be able to manipulate this to find certain magics. So it's a good thing that people have already delved into the game's code and extracted those very tables then. So here's the strategy. Rinoa uses Invincible Moon and Squall uses Renzo. We even set Squall's Renzo to auto in the settings. This prevents a bar showing up on screen during a Renzo, and we can use that time to search through Selphie's limit break instead. Every time Squall uses Renzo, we're hoping that he ends it with a final attack with a lengthy animation. Blasting Zone is perfect for this. The enemy attack animations can still be used as well if they're lengthy enough. We also use Rinoa's Angel Wings following her turns for more long animations. As soon as a long animation begins, we use Selphie's limit break. When we see the first magic, we locate all instances of that magic along with its number of casts within the 16 tables. Let's say for example the first magic was Full Cure times 1. We then choose do-over to see what the next magic is. If it matches the very next spell following Full Cure times 1 in any of our tables, then there's a good chance that could be the table of magics that we're currently in. We can choose do-over 4 or 5 times and check that all the magic attacks match the list of whatever table we're in. This is how we can determine exactly which of the 16 tables we're in. We mentioned that only 3 of these tables has the end in it. This means that if we get several magics in in a row that only matches with one table that doesn't have the end in it, we know that we need to change tables. We can change tables by pressing triangle to skip Selphie's turn and then selecting her limit break again. We would never have enough time to look up every single magic spell we get and cross-reference it with our magic tables all before the given animation finishes. So it's a good thing we can pause the game anytime. We can just hit pause right after choosing do-over. This gives us all the time we need to check our tables for the magic we see. When we determine that we are in one of the tables that contains the end, we will also then know exactly where in that table we are. This means we know how many times we need to press do-over to reach the end from there. If we hit the bottom of the list of 64 spells, it resets us back to the top again. If, for example, we are 10 magics away from the end, and it seems like there's enough time in the current animation, we can hit do-over 10 times quickly and will be guaranteed to get the end. This is what we need to do for all 4 phases of this fight. The second phase is against Griever, and it will use Shockwave Pulsar upon defeat. So if we don't have Invincible Moon active at that time, we lose instantly. We notice that Renoa will get about 2 turns in before the invincibility wears off, so on her 3rd turn, we need to be ready to use her limit break, in the hopes that she'll recast Invincible Moon. If we're unlucky and she uses something else like Angelo Cannon, then we need to hope that we get another chance before we die. Otherwise, we start the whole fight from the beginning. We must have made close to 100 attempts at this boss, and it was only when we really got this strategy down that we actually managed to get through some of these phases. And even then it all hinged on luck with Renoa's limit break. The 3rd phase is Ultimacia junctioned with Griever. Thankfully, she uses up a turn or two summoning these helixes to aid her in battle, but the end still wipes out this form along with the helixes that she summoned. This now reveals her final form, and she always starts this phase with her Hell's Judgment attack, which reduces all party members to 1 HP. But since we started this fight on 1 HP, this ends up being her worst attack. If our invincibility ends up wearing off before her final form, then we'll know that she'll just waste a turn using Hell's Judgment. We use the same strategy that we used for the first 3 phases, and we get in one last the end to finish her off. Except she doesn't die. It turns out, after depleting her HP to 0 in her final form, she is revived with exactly 100 HP 5 times. So following a 4th the end, we will now need to deal at least 100 damage 5 times before she'll finally go down for good. It was at this point when our invincibility wore off. She also has 2 parts that we can target, an upper part and a lower part. We need to only target the upper part. With all 3 of our characters being level 100, their normal attacks definitely do over 100 damage. So all we had to do was attack her 5 times to win. We landed 2 attacks with Squall and Selphie, and Ultimacia will also use up a turn to draw the Apocalypse magic from her lower half. This buys us a little bit of time, but we know that Apocalypse will wipe us out if she has a chance to cast it. For some reason, I wasn't confident that we would have time to land 3 more attacks, so I figured I would use Renoa's limit break instead. I figured we may as well, since if it was Angelo Cannon, then it would have dealt the 100 damage that we needed, but if it was Invincible Moon, then the Apocalypse wouldn't have affected us. Do you remember way back when we were in Timber, and we mentioned that we should prevent learning Angelo Strike? If learned, Angelo Strike has a chance of being used along with Angelo Cannon and Invincible Moon. In general, it's a good idea to avoid learning this, just to slightly improve the odds of Renoa using Invincible Moon instead. Angelo Strike deals physical damage like the cannon does, except it's only to a single random target. Somehow, in this run, we learned Angelo Strike, and we had no idea how. So, instead of either Cannon or Moon at this crucial moment, Renoa used Angelo Strike, and its random target was Ultimacia's lower half. Squall and Selphie got in their 3rd and 4th attacks on the upper half right afterwards, but then we got wiped out by the Apocalypse. If we had never learned Angelo Strike, then we would have won this fight. This was a devastating way to learn this lesson. So if you plan on trying this challenge out for yourself, do not learn Angelo Strike. Thankfully, it wasn't too long before we were able to get back to her final form for one more try. This time, we just held the X button down so that all characters would go for their normal attacks as fast as possible. We landed 3 attacks, and then Ultimacia drew Apocalypse as she got ready to cast it. Right then, our invincibility wore off. It was a race to see who would get their returns first, and honestly, if we weren't holding the X button down to ensure that we attacked as quick as we could, I don't think we would have made it. We got in 2 more attacks just in time to finally put Ultima Seer down once and for all. But there's no time to celebrate yet. We're not done yet, are we? We still need to take on the game's super bosses. The first one is within Ultima Seer's castle. Our first party will be our combat party, which will be made up of Squall, Renoa, and Selphie. We send party 1 to the fountain area, and then we switch to our second party. We use our second party to enter the upper right room where there'll be a rope to pull. Pulling this starts a timer. We quickly switch to the first party again and run to the room ahead before the timer runs out. Right there will be Omega Weapon. There is a high chance Omega Weapon will use level 5 death on its first turn, and this kills every party member whose level is a multiple of 5. Since all 3 party members are level 100, they all die immediately. It's possible that Omega Weapon will use a physical attack first instead, but if it kills Selphie, we've already lost this fight. That's right, we need to go back to the tried and true The End manipulation. None of the super bosses have multiple phases, so a single The End will be enough to win this fight. The only real challenge is getting either The End or Invincible Moon early enough, as any attack Omega uses will kill us. After several attempts, we finally managed to get The End early enough to take Omega down. Next, we're heading to the hidden research facility, located far in the bottom left corner of the overworld. We use the same party that we used for Omega. We need to get to the blue light in the center of the room, but we only want to walk when the light is off. Otherwise, we will encounter enemies every step. Preferably, we want as few encounters as possible, so we make sure to take our time. The light can dummy you sometimes and turn back on suddenly. Once we get to the light, we need to answer the question with our only option. It's not our will to fight. This forces an encounter against a ruby dragon. We use the same manipulation for the end to win this fight. We likely could have used Quistis to beat the ruby dragon with Degenerator, but we don't want Quistis in our party, and you'll see why. Defeating this dragon prompts a second question. This time, answer with never. Once again, we must fight a ruby dragon, and we win this fight in the same way. One more question prompt shows, and this time we must select the third hidden answer. You can't read it when you select it, but after you select it, it's revealed to say it's in our nature. Now we must fight Bahamut. This is why we didn't want Quistis in our party. We need to use both Invincible Moon and the End to win this fight, and since these 3 fights are all 4 in a row, we couldn't have swapped party members between them. Having to manipulate the End 3 times in a row gives us flashback to Ultima Seer, but after a few failures we finally pulled it off. Once Bahamut is defeated, we want to climb down the hole left behind after the battle. However, the hole isn't accessible yet. First, we must return to the Ragnarok, press triangle to enter the cockpit, and talk to Irvine to control the Ragnarok again. Now, upon returning to the research facility, we find that we can climb down to its lower levels. There is a puzzle in here that we must solve in order to challenge our final super boss, Ultima Weapon. The puzzle involves using certain amounts of steam pressure to access lower floors. We start off with 20 steam pressure, but 4 is used automatically on the first door, leaving us with 16. This puzzle changes slightly if you have Zell in your party, but since we don't, I'll just explain how to get through this without Zell. Head down another floor and expend 2 more steam pressure at the monitor to open the next floor. Here we must first interact with the monitor on the left of the room and expend 4 steam pressures to open a door. Inside here, we can use a valve to replenish 7 steam pressure to our current total, which should now be 17. Back in the previous room, we interact with the monitor on the right and expend 1 steam pressure to open another floor. In here, we simply expend 1 more steam pressure at the only monitor to continue, and we expend 1 more again in the next room. Our total is now currently 14, and this activates an elevator that we ride down. We're required to spend 4 more to advance, so that brings us down to 10. We can save the game here and make our way deeper. It goes without saying that we flee all encounters down here as they are very strong. At the very bottom of these underwater ruins, we must expend our last 10 steam pressure to complete the puzzle and summon Ultima Weapon. I'm sure you've already guessed the strategy by now, but it took me by surprise because in our very first attempt at this fight, Renoa used Invincible Moon on her very first turn. Ultima Weapon then used Gravager on its first turn, which didn't affect us of course, but during the Gravager animation, we got into a magic table that had the End on it. By the time we'd worked out where we were in the table, we were 22 do-overs away from the end. I wasn't exactly sure how long the Gravager animation was, but I decided to give it a try. We spammed do-over 22 times as fast as the game would allow, and we just landed on it at the very end of the animation. With that, the last super boss is defeated, and the run has finally come to a successful end. Can we beat Final Fantasy VIII without junctioning? With patience, luck, strategy, full knowledge of Selphie's magic tables, and even RNG manipulation, yes, you can! I need to seriously thank the Final Fantasy VIII speedrunners over on their Discord server for answering my many questions, but I especially need to thank the Final Fantasy VIII expert and speedrunner Kai Vel for his help. He supplied me the magic tables and taught me about the RNG manipulation techniques that we used in this run. Check out his Twitch if you enjoy Final Fantasy VIII speedruns. The man is a well of knowledge on this game. If you enjoyed challenge runs on classic games like this, then you're in the right place. Please subscribe, and if you want to see these challenge runs performed live, then follow our Twitch as well. Speaking of Twitch, allow me to thank all of our Twitch subscribers. They are A Lazy Dragon, Amber Sky, Big Wolf Chris, Corbin Corp, Crawling Wrestler, Davs Brander, D Stott, Duncan F93, Evolve Pixel, Finn Living with a Ghost, Gardenburger, Hakey Joey 14, Hair Druid Ty Newell, Helios 963, Henneman 1, Indvdu, Jax Pratty, Jamhead 91, Jesus Christ 00 AD, Jin 0505, John Fitz 49, John Von Baslake, Cad 1 Nat, Cami 7YT, Lacerated Hunter, Igmies, M3 Phyllis, Mackenzie 1398, Mad King Cryptid, Mel Phyllis, Miss Barbs, Nath HD 123, Nurse Bobber, Pee Wee, Platonic Penguin, Cyvel, Queen Cinder 621, Spectrum Z90, Static Joke, Sunbro 77, Tame Hunter 10 divide by 6, Terriander, Turvy MFR, TG Side Effects, That Chloe is Odd, The Bloody Screen, The Jammy Emperor, Tim Zero, Tor ZH, True DK0, XD Curtis DX, and XX Snooky XX. And of course, a big thank you to our patrons as well. They are A Lazy Dragon, Anthony Kermack, Courtney, Derniker, and Oscar Olsen. Beautiful people that you are. I really enjoyed this run. My favourite thing about it is the fact that all playable characters had their uses at one point or another. It made this challenge feel more like a puzzle with every boss, which I feel sets it apart from my Final Fantasy IX trance-only video. Speaking of, you can check out that video right here, it's linked on screen. Or maybe you want to know if you can beat all the Dark Souls 1 and 2 bosses in alphabetical order. Well, have I got a playlist for you.